give you politics from a different point of view. My name is Saquon Jones, and I'm joined by my co-panelists, Javier David, Anthony Millay, and Landon Days. Javier, we're going to start this segment off with you as we discuss the Huffington Post being bought out by AOL. If you add that on top of Comcast purchasing NBC, the WikiLeaks, the prosecution of all things associated with WikiLeaks, is our freedom of speech at jeopardy by corporate gangs?
No, corporate gangs. I think that's a little extreme. I think what it illustrates is a business or an industry that is very much in transition in an environment where consumers can get news from any particular source with, the proliferation of the internet, wireless devices. Content is ubiquitous. In most cases, it is free. The Huffington Post was a site that people could get news from for free. It was largely considered partisan, but again, it's free news. It shows that the business model has to change with the market. People, just like journalists just like anybody else, need to get paid, want to get paid. The sources of their money have to come from somewhere. So a lot of this consolidation that we're seeing taking place in the industry is really a function of the fact that news is increasingly, like it or not, a commodity. People are behind writing this story and putting it out there, and they need to be compensated just like anybody else. I don't think that is necessarily an assault on free speech. I think it means that there are an increasingly big number of choices. You can either pay for your content, or you can get it elsewhere, or you can get it for free. But at the end of the day, there are people that produce this stuff that sort of need to get paid just like everyone else.
No, I agree with that, and I'll let just go to either you or Landon or Anthony. But when you look at what happened with Keith Olbermann when Comcast bought out NBC, the assumption is that he was fired based off of his political.
Well, that's an assumption because there are a lot of very vocal partisan people on MSNBC that have not lost their jobs. There was a tremendous amount, if you look beneath the surface, going on with the Keith Olbermann story that had very little to do with his politics and a lot to do with the fact that he had a very difficult time working with not only his colleagues, but his bosses. And look, we all have to sing for our supper. We can't challenge the bosses and make trouble just because things don't go our way. And by all indications, Keith Olbermann dug his own grave because he was just a really big outsized personality, big outsized ego, and it ended up costing him.
Well, I wish the Republicans had the same philosophy when it comes to singing for President Obama, who is technically the boss, but I guess that doesn't necessarily happen. I'll let you respond to that, Anthony. I mean, or Landon.
I can only laugh. Sorry.
I agree with Javier because it makes business sense. We're having these mergers. That's business. That's what happens.
I see it as business as well.
But we do have to be concerned on both sides. So, like, for instance, let's say Saquon bought News Corp. I can already look at Javier's face because he would be concerned if Saquon purchased News Corp because
where would he get the money from?
If let's just say he had it. Let's say
I have it underneath my mattress, by the way.
You find out tomorrow. Saquon takes over News Corp. You would be concerned because you would be afraid that his political ideology might shape into, not necessarily, it might, but you might be concerned. So I'm not saying it could happen. My concern, though, is let's say some of these corporations, you want news, or you can control the news. And in today's world, where we don't have the same journalistic integrity that we used to on either side, we don't have the Walter Cronkite anymore. We use the news and Twitter and Facebook to shape markets. You put one report out, it can change how the stock market, how one stock fluctuates. So there is the possibility of it. And we just have to keep an eye on it. We have to be careful. I think both sides can agree on that one.
And when your response, Anthony, too, I want you to keep in mind that, and when you can look at the WikiLeaks too, with Assange, when he, as a veteran and as a security person, when he leaked the sensitive information from the United States government, that didn't technically trigger it. But when he said he was going to go against Bank of America, that's when it started to happen. So you look at the fact that when you have corporate interests going into journalism, journalistic integrity, they seem to not necessarily go the right way. And if they continuously buy out our media, at what point does it become propaganda and not news?
Well, there's two prongs to that. First of all, in all that you're discussing, the source of news and the source of information, but it really comes down to the individual. And what we need to do is strengthen the minds and education of our populations. It's up to us to understand what is garbage and what is nutritious. So there's garbage information and there's nutritious information. It's up to us to decide and filter that out. Secondly is, as far as intelligence is concerned, or WikiLeaks or any kind of leak, what is dangerous about leaking of intelligence is not so much the data or the raw information, but what is protected, and as a security person who comes from the intelligence community, what we always have to protect, irrespective of political partisanship, is the source. If you lose your source, you lose your intel, and your intel is very important. So what the threat or the crime that some of these guys may or may not have committed or allegedly committed was not so much that they released and gave up classified information. What they might have done is compromise the source. And in compromising the source, there's very, very serious business.
Well, I mean, I agree. I definitely agree with that, because, you know, they mentioned certain names and villages, and it's very small, and people know, you know, Afghanistan.
And I think we also need to make a distinction between WikiLeaks, which is an independent, bills itself as sort of an independent news outlet, but it was, Stock and Trade was divulging very classified information, state secrets, as opposed to not.
Huffington Post isn't so far from that too, Javier. I mean, and it's been purchased by AOL. I mean,
but you can't compare Huffington Post to WikiLeaks.
I'm not comparing the two. I'm just saying that the industry is basically the same. The Huffington Post is out there to enlighten. WikiLeaks is out there to enlighten. Even Fox News, I don't know how successful they've been, is out there to enlighten. But at the end of the day, like you said, I mean, I'm very nervous about the fact that you have a tremendous amount of corporations who are purchasing news entities, and it would not be any different than what Hitler did when he, you know, used propaganda and how he wanted it to shape the mind of Germany when he took power, and that turned into World War II. And I'm just saying at the end of the day that when you have an outside entity who is completely taking control over journalistic integrity, we can potentially have an issue there. And as a journalist,
well,
I mean,
you can also argue that the proprietors of certain websites or platforms or whatever are under no obligation to sell their business to anyone. No one forced Arianna Huffington at the barrel of a gun to sell this project that in which she has invested a tremendous amount of time and effort and, money, which she, by the way, got a pretty sizable payday out of it, maybe about $20 million or so, if I'm not mistaken. You know, she profited from it. It was mutually beneficial. The arrangements that are taking place, the consolidation that is taking place, is based largely on the idea that both parties will benefit in some form or fashion. It's not one party sort of pointing a gun at another and saying, sell me your business or else.
All right, well, I'll let you close it out, Landon. You got about 30 seconds.
I guess, no, Javier's right. You know, it was business. And I think we all agree. It was like, you know, it's fine and everything, but the question is, at one point, though, let's say a monopoly occurs in that industry where one company then does control information. In today's world of technology, information is everything. Information is what our economy is pretty much based off of these days, you know. So I think that's something we just have to keep an eye on. But as right now, it was, you know, she made, I think it was sold off $315 million, and she said she made $20 million off of it. You know, I wish I started Huffington Post. I wouldn't be complaining myself right now. Right. So we just got to be careful with it. That's all.
All right, we're going to conclude with Landon's ambition. Please join us as we come right back to Across the Aisle. Once again, my name is Saquon Jones, and I'm joined by my co-panelists, Javier David, Anthony Millay, and Landon Days. Anthony, we're going to start the second segment off with you as we discuss Jeb Bush. He is now being considered the front runner to run for the Republican Party in 2012. It's just a whole different group. It's almost like every single week there seems to be a different Republican savior. Is this going to be any different, or what are we looking at in Jeb Bush that we don't see in, say, Palin or Romney?
A good Saturday Night Live sketch. That's about it. I think it's very presumptuous and very early in the game to even float names like Bush or even presume that Obama would be the nominee as well. It's a long way away, and that's a great big presumption. There's a lot can happen between now and then. Also, I think that if you asked me to make a model, to make a profile of who the next Republican presidential candidate should be. I think the qualities that he should have, he or she should have, I think that the next candidate from the Republican side should understand the core Republican principles and not the imagery. I'm talking about the basics. Basically, lean government, basically taxation under control, basically a balanced budget, strong defense. Common sense stuff. Let business and people who make their money keep their money, and let the government get out of the way of ingenuity. I think that, from my perspective, I think that the next candidate should have some military experience or be a veteran, being that the lessons learned of leadership and such that occurred in the 20th century should come out of that leadership role. I think he should have been a small business owner versus a big business owner. The small business owner has a whole lot more ingenuity and management skills, believe it or not, than the large business owner.
But who is that person out there? I mean, I understand, you know, there's this model that everybody wants to have. I mean, that sounds good if
sounds
that's a
like
Democrat,
me.
You know? But I mean, we're not.
It sounds like
make
me.
no mistake. I mean, you ran for Congress in your district, and you realize that 2 years. I mean, Landon and I, we both ran for city council, and it just feels like yesterday that the election was over, you know, and now we're basically 2 years.
Sure.
And to make, I mean, it's
a lot
not
of work.
really a lot of time. And to address the fact that Obama may not be the candidate, I mean, outside of him getting caught with, like, some sort of drugs in a hotel room.
A dead girl or a live boy.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be the candidate. I mean, I make no mistake. I mean, outside of something catastrophic happening,
Well, that's the presumption. But if you wanted to presume,
But, I mean,
presume
I
that,
mean,
I
but,
think
I
that
mean-
would be the model. The model would be a common sense, common sense person coming out of the ranks of the people, not necessarily one who's already come out of the realm of politics, who's already a legislator, already that. I think the people across both sides of the aisle looking for a common sense person, and I draw from this in all seriousness from my campaign. And when I was out there talking to people, it was very funny when I was in the Bronx.
Well, we're looking at it from a national perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
But it's a microcosm. What I found out there was that when I gave my platform and I spoke to groups of people standing at bus stops, 50 people, 30 people in the bus stop, they come to me and say, "Yeah, that's great. I want to vote for you. What line are you on?" And I said, "Republican." They said, "Oh no, I'm going to vote Democrat." So when they heard what I had to say and heard what I want to do where I come from, it made sense to them. But some of it is just how much of it is conformity and conditioning, and I think that goes across the country.
But yes, but I'll answer what you just said. But in the sense of Bush, I don't think the Bush name would galvanize the middle and some of the more central Republicans.
It doesn't galvanize me.
I mean, it might. I think Jeb. I don't think if the next. I think there will be another Bush president, but I think it's going to be Jeb's son probably. You know, because the Latin background and the Republican, which is going to be a growing, populace and population in the future. Yeah. But what you just said though about people like what you said, but then you're a Republican, because what happens, and it can be the same thing on the Democratic side, you might have great ideas as the individual Republican, but in whole, a lot of people don't agree what they see what the Republican Party does in its governing. You know, because and even President Obama realized this also. He has some great ideas, and he wants to push his ideas through. But when it comes to actually governing, when he has to deal with both sides and his own side, who have their own agendas, they have their own things they want to do, it becomes a lot harder.
Well, I'm a Republican rebel. I'm a reformist. I'm a Republican rebel. I'm different.
So was John McCain. Look what they did to him. They beat down John McCain until and turned him to someone he wasn't anymore.
Yeah,
and speaking about Jeb Bush, I think as Anthony here said, much of the speculation is, and if you're speaking about any Republican candidate at the point, it's very premature. I think it's a function of largely of how wide open the field is, that there is no front runner per se. Jeb Bush in particular, I don't think that he has a tremendous amount of grassroots. I don't sense that he has a tremendous amount of grassroots support. I think that people are largely exhausted on the idea of not the Bush name per se, but the idea that the presidency is almost hereditary. You've already had two presidents by the name of Bush.